Let's get into it. Hand me that book, honey.
Here's the book.
Hand me the book. We are going to be covering a little bit about what's in this book. If you don't know what book this is, 1984, George Orwell. And what made me want to bring out this book, we've been reading it together, is something that Tim Dillon and Joe Rogan are talking about in this clip. So we're going to be showing you the Joe Rogan clip. Then we're going to be showing you a clip of Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson talking. And then the wife, the lovely wife here, is going to be reading a certain passage out of 1984. Because I think it really, as you read this book, the world starts to seem dark.
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, just a little bit. Let's get into the clip first. I'll let you guys know what we mean as we go on. But in this, we're basically discussing what's going on in Ukraine. But not what's going on with the Ukraine, but how the mainstream media is covering it and positioning it to the people. So don't forget about Sold Not For Sale. We got that. We got Public Enemy #1, of course. And we got The Great Resist. Discount code I am Coach Colin, all capital letters, all one word, one L in the name Colin. Let's get into this first clip.
Smart.
Oh, it's really smart. And it's great because real estate is perfect to launder money. You can buy it with a shell corp. You don't have to buy it under your name.
Right.
You can buy it under that. And by the way, you can disguise that shell corp with 100 other shell corps so that like nobody's going to go through. It's like a pad where they'd have to keep flipping pages to find the actual owner of the actual company.
Well, wasn't this part of the problem with the Ukraine stuff?
Oh, yeah.
That was part of the problem.
I don't know what you mean, but I am agreeing. No, Hunter Biden, yeah.
And the family. There was a bunch of shell corps that were involved
Oh,
in that.
yeah. Well, Hunter Biden's an attorney, number one, and he did some financial investments, but he certainly had a very healthy budget for fun. And now he had a budget for extracurricular activities. And where does that come from? It's a slush fund that comes from a lot of shady dealings. This guy had no expertise in energy. He was he's a consultant for Burisma, a Ukrainian energy company. And now we've given Ukraine, I don't know what it is. It's an insane amount of money.
I think the last count was, is it $170 billion? Well, how much money have we given to Ukraine?
And it's just interesting that that's the country that our president's son was having his little internship.
It's just a coincidence, dude.
I know.
Sometimes coincidences happen.
But we can't, you know what it is? It's like, I watch the worst people in the world, the people at Beverly Hills who like scream at valets and yell at their nannies, and they're not humanitarians.
Right.
Overnight, they all had Ukrainian flags.
Yeah.
It was interesting. They don't care about Darfur, the Sudan, anything going on in Africa. They don't care about any of the problems happening in countries like Yemen, but they all immediately decided, almost overnight, that the only humanitarian crisis worth caring about was the Ukraine.
Well, when baseball season's over, you start paying attention to football.
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
That's exactly what it is.
That's what it is. It's sports for dorks. Just how much aid has U.S. sent to Ukraine? Total $75.4 billion. I think
there's more.
I think that's
I was seeing more too, but this is a few
and you
things
know how much of this aid disappears?
First of all, isn't it funny that we're saying $75 billion? I think it's more.
That's
a low number.
But how much of this aid disappears off the backs of trucks?
Right. Oh, it's $113 billion.
I don't know. That's his past president.
And by the way, you could start looking into how much of it is just evaporated, how much of that money's disappeared, where it went.
Well, there was this one story about this one guy who had pilfered off $1 billion, and they didn't even arrest him. They just made him resign.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is that story about?
Yeah.
Like, I read the headline. I was like, I'm going to get to that eventually.
Right.
Did you see that story, Jamie?
Whenever you're dispersing money in a war, it's always strange because you have to pay people off.
Oh,
it's a perfect place for things to disappear, money-wise.
One of my favorite moments during all this was the New York Times going after Candace Owens.
Oh, sure.
Did you see that?
For what they had reported.
They said to her, what evidence do you have that Ukraine is corrupt?
It's corrupt.
And she said, your fucking newspaper.
Article.
And she says, from just a couple of years ago.
Well, it
was like 2017 or 18
there was a million
like
Vice documentaries about how Ukraine was the home of white nationalism. The thing we were all, supposedly, this was the greatest threat to human civilization.
Right.
And we were told that every single day. This country, the Ukraine, was a white nationalist country that had lots of these groups that fomented terror and they were going to start working with the white nationalist groups in America. And there was articles written about that. There were documentaries about that. All of that went out the window.
Do you remember when?
Right out the window.
Who was it? Was it Jon Stewart that gave that dude the award?
He
had
gave him
Nazi
a medal.
tattoo?
Yeah. and I'm sure Stewart doesn't even know. It's like, this guy's a hero. You pin something on him. But they're avowed neo-Nazis in that country. They have SS tattoos. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's not everybody, but that Azov battalion is a huge force, you know? And
That's so wild.
it's wild. And it's one of the reasons people think Zelensky, who's going to sign those Minsk Accords and end this little civil war issue they had going on in the northern province in Donbass, he didn't sign any of that. People think, and people have, pontificated that either those hardliners in the Ukrainian government and military go, you sign this, we'll kill you. Like if you use it, or the U.S. State Department was like, no. You don't sign this. You keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, God.
And if there is a war, we have your back.
Oh, my God.
And this is a well-known fact that everybody wanted some type of agreement early before there was a war with these northern Russian-speaking regions and the government of Ukraine, so that there was autonomy to a certain degree, that they could speak the language, that they could have political parties. And again, I'm not saying that Russia is like, even though I am spiritually Russian. Someone told me that, and I have a Russian aesthetic. But that's not why I'm saying this. I'm just saying the facts are all there. And we've had this long, bloody war in which every time this guy wants to negotiate or thinks about, we go, don't, keep going, keep fighting. We got you. And then, Nikki Haley, all these people go, no, it's civilizational. By the way, nothing's regional. Everything's civilizational. Israel, Palestine, civilizational. It's odd. It's like, but wait a minute. That's been a regional conflict forever. Since 1946. They go, no, it's about values. It's about our values. So we got to send them billions of dollars and we might have to get involved because it's about our value. And you start going, wait a minute, it's about our values in northern Ukraine? So all of these little, and I'm not saying they're little, but all of these conflicts, we can't not get involved. We can't in some way. We have to be involved. We have to fund them. We have to give weapons because we convince everybody that all of these conflicts are a big battle for the future of civilization. And the next step is Putin's going to steamroll Vermont. He's coming to Vermont. You let him do what he's doing in the Ukraine, he's going to steamroll. He's coming to Aspen. You want to see what happens when Russia owns Aspen? And nobody thinks logically, like, maybe we like war. Maybe we just like having a constant business.
Maybe Eisenhower was right.
Yeah.
When Eisenhower warned people when he was leaving office, I mean, that should be required listening to anybody that's confused as to why we're doing certain things.
Right.
They're making a lot of money right now. And if they can keep this rolling.
Yeah. They're making great money. And I'm not making any of it from that.
And if you can have some sort
Cut
of a motivation.
me in.
You get some sort of a motivation, like you're trying to save civilization.
Oh, always.
You can justify so much.
Now, notice that when Saudi Arabia is killing Yemenis, it's not civilizational. That's not civilizational. But Ukraine, Russia is. And anything that goes on in Israel and Palestine is. But when the country of Yemen is being starved out, bombed, and killed with money and weapons from the U.S. through Saudi Arabia, that's not civilizational.
Yeah.
That's not civilizational.
Yeah.
But Nikki Haley's up there like, let's fight it. Let's go. China, let's go.
Why do you think she's doing that?
Because
Has she always been that way?
She wants the big money. And the big money people like when you get, well, she's a woman, so she's got to be tough. Ooh. Ban TikTok, I'll kill you.
She wants to ban TikTok?
Oh, ban it. Whoa. Ban it. And then we're going to go there and kick China's ass for making it. I'm Nikki Haley. I'm tough. I'm what? Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton came out like the running of the bulls going, fuck Putin. We should kill, Hillary's on record saying some of the most bellicose things ever about what we should be doing with our CIA and with our military. And Nikki Haley's basically going out there going, the big money likes when you're open to a little conflict. They like that. The Koch brothers types like when you leave the door open. You don't have to say we're going to do it, but leave the door open. All options on the table. That's their favorite word. Their favorite sense is like, oh, we're leaving all options on the table. It's about our values, says Nikki Haley. It's about our values. In northern Ukraine, she wants the money. I don't know what Chris Christie's up there talking about. Ozempic or whatever, but he's not getting $1. No one's giving him anything.
He's a weird one.
He's just there to ruin things. Here's what I appreciate about Chris Christie. He exists only to destroy.
Chris Christie. You haven't seen him around, have you?
No, I don't know who that is.
He's terrible. He's running for president. Donald Trump wasn't at one of the debates, and he goes, and he thought this was like such a big. He thought he was gonna make like a massive headlines. He's like, Donald Trump, more like Donald Duck. I'm gonna call him Donald Duck from now on because
he's so excited,
ducking us. Oh man, he thought he was like.
He thought he had something.
He's like, I got it. For sure, all his aides were like, "Oh no, I told him no. I told him
you
no.
have a speechwriter."
I told him not to say that. I think this is gonna work out really well. I think it's gonna, just let me. Yeah, but Tim Dillon's right on point. Like, he knows he can't win. He's just there to like, just disgrace or just get at whoever he can get at. But he knows he's not even close. Mm-hmm. It's weird. When it gets to that point, you shouldn't even be allowed. They should be like, "What are you doing? You got 1%, but you gotta let him run. Yeah, you gotta let him try. You know, I'm sure there's some people that want to vote for him.
Well, he has 1%.
Yeah, exactly.
That's quite a bit,
right? Exactly. That is a lot of people. So, with what Tim was talking about, the things that stood out to me, which is why I want you to. Oh, what should we do? Should we go 1984 first, or should we go Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson first?
Let's do Candace Owens.
I think so.
I think I should read her tweet first.
Yes. So
because they're talking about it in the video.
Let me pull that up because they brought up Candace Owens. And how she, that would make sense to bring that up first. See, that's why I married her. Okay, it was love too, but like this is. But
organizational skills, up there,
huge part. So this is the first part of the tweet. I pulled up this one. You can see on my screen.
Yeah. So she said the actual tweet said, received an email from the New York Times asking for comment regarding me advancing ideas that Ukraine is a corrupt country, similar to Russian state TV. I replied informing them that I actually got my ideas from the New York Times and provided them with links to their past articles. And then, of course, she has to provide the receipts here.
Yeah, the emails.
Yeah. So the first email that she was sent was from somebody at the New York Times. She blocked out the name, of course. Mm-hmm. But it says, "Hi there, I'm writing from the New York Times. We're working on a story about Russian messaging that includes some of your comments. We note that you advanced the idea that Ukraine was a corrupt country, which matched comments we've seen from Russian state media. I'm wondering if you have any context or further comment to add about this comparison. We're finalizing the story today. Thanks." So that's what they said to her. And then the very next one is her response back to them. She says, "Hi, I am very confused by this email. I learned about the idea that Ukraine was a corrupt country from the New York Times. You guys have covered the corruption of Ukraine extensively for years. As just one example, here is a piece from the New York Times editorial board entitled Ukraine's Unyielding Corruption," and she provides the link. Then she says, "I educated myself about both the neo-N problem in Ukraine and the unyielding corruption by reading your newspaper, not Russian state media. Is there something specific I said that was different from what you guys have written in the past? Thank you, Candace Owens."
Man, amazing.
And then one more.
Yeah.
Because she can't just be done. She says, "For good measure, here are some more past articles written from reputable sources over the past few years about the corruption and neo-N problem in Ukraine. For clarity, as you now suggesting that the Western media covered extensively over the last few years is now just Russian propaganda? Are you suggesting all of these articles were sponsored by Russian state media? Again, I would love to provide you with a quote for your article. I just want to be clear regarding what you mean when you say that I am advancing ideas that Ukraine was a corrupt country, when in fact I got my ideas from your publication."
Wow. Oh man, I'm telling you, what I say off camera, she should be the press secretary.
Yeah.
Oh man, Trump is missing. If whoever gets in office, anyone would benefit from her being the press secretary.
That'd be amazing.
It doesn't matter who gets in.
Yeah.
They would benefit massively from having her be the press secretary. Mm-hmm. She would be able to handle anybody because she didn't take minutes to do that. She was just like,
yeah, exactly.
Quote. Like,
yeah.
She just did it in a second. She's probably like holding a baby.
Exactly. So unbothered.
Yeah, she probably sent it and just continued her conversation with her husband.
Exactly.
Wild that they did that.
It's amazing.
Needless to say, that story probably fell through.
Yeah. I looked for it. I couldn't find anything kind of around that date.
It dissolved for sure once she said that.
Yeah.
Now, should I get to the video, I think?
Yeah.
This is Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens speaking about this exact situation that we just went over, but you can hear Candace Owens' actual thoughts on the whole matter. Come on, Tucker.
Candace Owens is completely unafraid of anyone, so she's often accused of things. The New York Times, in its latest salvo, is accusing her of working for Vladimir Putin. A reporter just wrote to Candace Owens, quote, "We note you have advanced the idea that Ukraine was a corrupt country, which matched comments we've seen from Russian state media." Calling Ukraine corrupt. is Russian propaganda. So here's what Candace Owens wrote in response. I'm very confused by this email. I learned about Ukraine's corruption from the New York Times. As just one example, here is a piece from the New York Times editorial board entitled, Ukraine's Unyielding Corruption. Greatest response ever. Founder of the charity Blexit, Candace Owens joins us now. That is just too great. How did they respond to you, Candace?
I mean, I also sent them even more links. I mean, that was just one link that I sent them, but there's 10, 20 links between the Washington Post and the New York Times over the last 3 or 4 years telling us about how unyielding the corruption is and really spelling out to us how corrupt President Zelensky is, but they've magically changed their mind. So I was confused. Maybe Russian disinformation means now for the New York Times truth, given the Hunter Biden laptop scenario, which they called Russian disinformation and they now acknowledge is fully true. Obviously, he responded and said, thank you for sending these links, and then completely moved the goalposts and asked me whether or not I accepted the official government narrative regarding biolabs and whether they were just opened for research. And I said, this is completely nonsensical. What does this have to do with your initial question? And then I sent him another link and I said, is that the official government narrative regarding biolabs? Is it for research? Because you guys also told me in another article that they were funding these labs to shut down previous Soviet labs. And then he just said, thank you for your time, no more questions. Because I don't think he's reading the New York Times and doesn't realize how many times they pivot the narrative. And here's the thing. Nobody believes this Russian puppet stuff. I mean, it's just ridiculous. A black woman in the United States have never even been to Russia. I mean, I can't think of a Russian food off the top of my head. I mean, it's so ridiculous. I refuse to give it any air. But they say these things when you arrive at a truth that they don't want them looking at, that they don't want the public at large looking at. They say, oh, looky over here. Never mind, this person's a Russian puppet. Exactly like they did with the Hunter Biden laptop until they were ready to acknowledge the truth. So I really tried to reflect on what it was that I was hitting at that was bothering them. And really, it was me talking about Zelensky. You know, Zelensky right now, according to the mainstream narrative, the new mainstream narrative, I should say, is Batman, right? We're all supposed to just go, he's an amazing hero and he's not corrupt. And I've been talking about their previous covering of him in the Pandora Papers, talking about his ties to, you know, Ukrainian billionaires that have a controlling interest in Burisma. That might be a significant conversation for the press to have in a moment when we have Biden's administration egging us on, trying to get us more involved in this conflict in Ukraine, and they don't want that conversation to be had. So instead, they're going with a black female from the United States is somehow on Putin's payroll, which is just pointedly ridiculous.
Oh, I know the feeling. Russian disinformation. So the Biden family's patron's in trouble. The U.S. military has to save him.
So that was Candace Owens' take on the whole thing.
I love Tucker's laugh.
Yeah, his laugh is wild. So many people have commented on it.
It's so funny.
Shane Gillis was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was talking about how odd it is. And Joe Rogan's like, he's odd altogether. He's just an odd person.
He sounds like a maniacal elf when he laughs. And there's always like a little pause before he laughs too, so
Yeah.
it's like pre-planned.
He's funny. He's a funny guy.
Yeah,
Very
funny.
interesting guy.
What throws me about that was the what did they say? Government approved narrative.
Yeah.
Even that statement, I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Very, very odd to have a publication like that approach you, say that to you, you provide all that information like she did, and then go to a completely different topic when you just said you were finalizing this other story today.
Yeah.
It was so odd.
It was like they're trying to like catch her in something else.
Yeah. It was as if what they were trying to do was make a story based on her.
Yes.
And it's like, let's throw this one out. Okay, that didn't work. Let's throw this one out.
Yeah. They're trying to find just some kind of inflammatory comment.
Like, you know, we said that the story dried up and there probably was no story to begin with.
Yeah.
They're trying to just figure out, how do we get a story on Candace Owens? How do we get her to say something?
So that they can put a headline up saying Candace Owens says this.
Yeah. Wow. Absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wild. Again, press secretary for sure. Easily.
Yeah.
So that reminded me, everything that happened from what Tim was talking about to what Candace Owens went through, that reminded me of what we've been reading. Because we've been reading a little nighttime reading, me and the wife.
Yeah, a little light reading.
Yeah, 1984. And it started reminding me of things that you were reading. And it's hard to even describe because of the writing in 1984. But just talking about how, you know, once the party says something, that's how it's always been.
Yes.
It's never been a different way.
Yes.
And if you dare to say, at least in that world, if you dare to say that it ever was different, you're going against the party, you're going to disappear, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
And yeah, from that's what Tim's talking about, because Tim brought up the fact, he's like, out of nowhere, all of these, he was saying like soccer mom, like white women, whatever, they all decided that Ukraine was the thing to fight for.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. And we've all seen that. We've seen the flag go from a France flag to a black square for black people, the LGBTQ, to now Ukraine. It just kept changing.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a house in our neighborhood that has like all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, they stay up to date.
Yeah.
And they keep it up until it's all tattered, which they don't realize is a sign of disrespect. But or maybe they do. I have no idea. But it gets to that point, and then as this whole conflict has gone on, it reminds me of another thing from the book. That slogan of the party slogan, part of it at least, is peace is war. I believe that's
war
how
is peace.
War
Yeah.
is peace.
Yeah.
Yes. And that goes to what Tim was talking about, how it's about values and it's about democracy and all of these things. Like, it's so interesting.
I think it says as well, ignorance is power.
Yes, which is a huge thing, which goes in line with, like, as long as you, whatever happens, you change your Facebook flag, you know, just go along with it, put your black square up, and that's it. That's what we've told you to do.
Yeah.
And if you go against it, you're an issue.
Yeah, it says ignorance is strength.
Yeah.
Freedom is slavery. War is peace.
Yeah. So, I guess let's get into that.
Do you want me to read you that little part of the book?
Well, the part that we were talking about, or I can touch on Zelensky over here, whatever you want.
Yeah, I'll read the part of the book. So it says, at this moment, for example, Oceania was at war with Eurasia and in alliance with East Asia. In no public or private utterance was it ever admitted that the three powers had at any time been grouped along different lines. Actually, as Winston well knew, it was only 4 years since Oceania had been at war with East Asia and in alliance with Eurasia. But that was merely a piece of furtive knowledge which he happened to possess because his memory was not satisfactorily under control. Officially, the change of partners had never happened. Oceania was at war with Eurasia, therefore Oceania had always been at war with Eurasia. The enemy of the moment always represented absolute evil, and it followed that any past or future agreement with him was impossible.
Yeah.
That's the part that we were
No,
discussing.
there was more. There was more of it where he was talking about how double speak works and everything like that.
Yeah.
What
That's
part
a
is
little
that?
bit later on. I don't know
Is it?
exactly where that part is.
See if you can find it. I'm gonna start pulling up the
That part was
examples.
really confusing.
I know.
I couldn't even read it because I was getting confused. So I don't know if I want to read that part out loud.
Don't worry. It's fine. But I'm just pulling up this because this is a compilation that somebody found on X. And it was just all of these things that they used to say about Ukraine from 2015, 2016, talking about corruption, talking about deepening alliances with far right in regards to President Zelensky, secret court documents expose state looting in Ukraine, IMF ranks Ukraine as Europe's poorest country, all of these things that they were talking about just years ago. And then there's headlines like this. This is what Candace Owens was referring to, Ukraine's unyielding corruption. Then there's other headlines like this. This is from 2014. Then they had this one here, also from about 5 years ago. So this is how they used to cover Ukraine, right? And then all of a sudden it switched to a narrative of the unlikely hero when they were talking about Zelensky. And this is also from the New York Times, just in case you're wondering. Let me just verify that for you guys. That is from the New York Times. I went ahead and paid for a New York Times subscription so I could show you guys this. President Zelensky is a profile of courage. So it's like the narrative just completely flipped. Mm-hmm. Completely.
From corruption to courage.
Yeah, true. And then TV president turned war hero. Mm-hmm. All of these things out of nowhere. And if you were to dare point out any other thing, all of a sudden you became this big issue. You became this person that wasn't along with the party. Yeah. Wasn't along with what was going on.
And it's funny because in that little passage that I just read, he said specifically like only 4 years ago, their alliance had flipped. Yeah. And that's about the same timeline as here.
Exactly. And for him, Winston, I believe,
Yeah,
Winston
the main
Smith,
character.
he can only have those thoughts. He can't really speak that out to anybody.
No.
you know?
Otherwise, he would be disappeared.
And the thing is, right now we live in a world where people are kind of in the same boat. If there's anybody who is, along with all of this stuff, and they have the thought process of, but wasn't it like this just a year? Like maybe they're like a really well-read person. They're like, I remember reading this. I remember reading this.
Yeah.
But they can't bring that up now
Yeah.
because that's not what's happening. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
I always think that too when I see anybody on like Instagram or anything saying something in terms of support for either Israel or Palestine.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which side they support, or even if they say they just want people not to pass away.
Yeah. Yeah.
They always get attacked.
Oh, of course. No matter what.
It's ridiculous.
I've done videos on this whole thing, and I talk about how it's complicated. It's a complicated situation. And somebody's like, that's the cowardly way to go. And I'm like, no, it's actually extremely complex.
Yeah.
It's actually very, very complicated. And for that person who was on, which I don't even know which side, because they were just talking, they were attacking me for saying it's complicated. But for that person, it's like, no, it's very black and white. Yeah. I have digested this side of the narrative, and this is all very black and white. You should understand that. And when you're like, no, all of a sudden you become this person who's kind of like, you become the in 1984 the subject of the 2 minutes of hate.
Yeah. Exactly.
Everybody starts stomping their feet and hissing at you. It's very interesting. Did you find it? Is that why you're holding it?
I did. It's just, I don't want to read this.
Try and give it a read. People, listen, just so you know, people love your voice. Somebody today was like, lovely voice. Some other guy said that you should be doing ASMR, okay, which I take as fighting words a little bit. I understand where you're coming from, though.
It's like they could go to sleep to it. That's what ASMR is.
That's what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But yeah, don't worry. They love your voice.
It says, his mind slid away into the labyrinthine world of doublethink. To know and not to know. To be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies. To hold simultaneously two opinions which cancelled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them. To use logic against logic. To repudiate morality while laying claim to it. To believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy. To forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw it back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again. And above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was the ultimate subtlety. Consciously to induce unconsciousness, and then, once again, to become unconscious of the act of hypnosis you had just performed. Even to understand the world doublethink involved the use of doublethink.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very confusing passage.
Well, I mean, that's what it's meant to be that way, because that mindset is very confusing as you look at it from the outside.
Yes.
When you're in it, you just kind of switch.
Yeah.
Just like I brought up the flags as a perfect example, right? Like people on Facebook, it's just like whenever that happens, it's not like people seek that out. Mm-hmm. Facebook just goes, hey, you want to switch?
Yeah.
Facebook shows it to you. It says,
for the profile picture.
You want to support?
Yeah.
And you go, yes. That's it.
That's
you don't
true.
do anything. There's nothing in your heart about that or anything.
Mm-hmm.
You're just like, okay, there it is. I've been hearing about this. There we go. I've done it. Nobody knew why they were putting black squares in their profile.
Oh my God. That was so crazy.
And no one cared.
I didn't go on Instagram that day.
Oh man. Yeah, that was crazy. But it's that exact thing where you gotta, as it said in the book, forget it and then bring it back when you need it.
Yes. That's
so it's
true.
like for now, all of that's gone. Everything that we were talking about previously from years ago, how they were speaking about this conflict.
Yeah.
And when it needs to come back, it will.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows that it's not actually the people. It's not the people who need to do it when we're talking about the book or the real world. It's not the people that need to do it. That's what the party needs.
Yeah.
The party needs you to forget and needs you to bring it back when it's time to bring it back.
Yeah.
And they will tell you when that time is.
And they use the media as a distraction.
Well, they use
and
the
say
media.
things like the government approved narrative.
Well, things like that, but also they use the media as the tool. That's not even the tool, like it's the beacon.
Yes.
It's time to forget. This is the thing.
This is what we're focusing on now.
Like, and now that thing's gone. It's like, okay, now this thing's back. Okay, no problem. Like, and you can just keep on doing that. Like, it's very odd. It's very, very odd. But as I start, well, as she's reading it to me.
See, we read it at bedtime. It is ASMR for you. You always fall asleep.
Yeah, it's true. Right away. But it is it's becoming very clear as we start to read this book.
Yeah, certain things definitely pop out.
Yeah, which is why so many people kind of say that you need to read this book. You know? Very, very true. If you haven't read it, please do. Please do. On YouTube, there is somebody who's actually reading it on audio. It's an audiobook version. If you just put it in 1984 audiobook version, somebody is reading it. It's really good. Really, really good. It's like 10 hours long, but you can just like parse it out chapter by chapter. Really, really good. They make it sound like a movie.
Yeah, it's cool with the sound effects.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're definitely going to have our kids reading this book. That's for sure. It's one of those ones that you need before that world comes real.
Yeah,
Like
so you can see.
So you can have it.
Yes.
Because it'll be like one day somebody will get a copy of it and it won't be the same book.
Yeah, I have my dad's copy from the 60s. We
Do
should
you?
even check if it's
Yeah.
still the same.
Yeah, we should.
That'd be insane if they changed that book.
Can you imagine? Wow.
I also have an older copy of Brave New World.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just bought that new copy. We can compare it.
Yeah, mine's not super old. I think it's from like the early 2000s. But the
Early.
1984 is like 60s.
Yeah, we should check. Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to that just made me think as I was listening to Tim and I'm hearing this book every single day, you know, I just made that connection. He was just like he's like, you're not allowed to question it. He's like, all of a sudden they all switched and all of a sudden we all forgot what was being said and now we remember a completely different thing. It's just wild to me
Yeah, it's crazy.
that's able to be done, and it makes me just wonder like what else has been done.
And
you know?
Candace Owens is being called out for it as well.
Yeah, she's a problem.
But thankfully, like, we still have the ability to pull up old things.
Yeah.
Because in the book, the main character's job is literally to go back and change records so that they agree with the present.
Yeah.
So once that starts happening, like, there's no way to be able to prove your point.
Yeah.
And then like at that point too, like, if I remember something a certain way, but it was years ago and nobody else remembers it, I'm not allowed to write it down. That memory will fade.
Yeah.
And I'll start doubting if things ever happened that way.
Yeah. Very true. Because whoever you go to will have this state approved narrative.
Exactly. Because you can't risk discussing it out loud.
Yeah, that too. It's like I told you when I was listening to that podcast of that person who had just came from Cuba, and they were talking about how when you have political conversations, they had to whisper, and some people would just shun it altogether.
Yeah,
just be like,
it's not worth the risk.
Because there was people who were in, like, if you had, I don't know, like a block, there'd be like two guys on the block, kind of periodically patrolling, but also listening very closely.
Yeah.
Going up to windows that they could hear a conversation, because in Cuba they don't particularly have windows.
They're just openings.
It's just kind
I
of
guess.
open. So if you heard some stuff, you go and listen, see what you heard. If you heard that person talking about something that's kind of against the current regime that they got over there,
The government approved narrative.
yeah, then that would be an issue,
Yeah.
a big issue. Wild stuff. And honestly, when it comes to the whole Russia-Ukraine thing, I don't really like it. That's just what Tim was talking about. I don't really have a side on either of those things.
Me neither, because I feel like we haven't been given any actual information.
Yeah, it's not enough, and there's so many other things happening. Like I was saying before, the border's just like open. It's just like, it's just like
Yeah,
like
there's a
screen
lot
door.
of local things.
Yeah, there's so many other things to focus on other than that. But I get it. I get why people get caught up in it. But anyway, is that everything you got?
That's it.
Perfect. Guys, like, subscribe, and Merry Christmas. Share the video as well. Someone reminded me, they're like, maybe you should say this at the beginning. And I was like, I always mean to. and I always forget. And I remember as we're wrapping
that's
up.
nice that they want to help you out like that. That's sweet.
I gotta remember to say it at the beginning. But share. It helps us tremendously. And other than that, we are out.
Bye.